Imagine standing in a courtyard in southern Portugal on a Tuesday morning. White sheets billow from a line strung between two stone walls. A woman on the third floor leans over her balcony railing, pinning a row of small shirts above the narrow street, while her neighbor waters a clay pot of basil one balcony over. The whole block smells like clean linen and warm stone. Now picture a subdivision outside Dallas. Identical lawns mowed to identical heights. Identical driveways leading to identical garage doors. And somewhere behind one of those beige facades, a dryer has been tumbling for 50 minutes straight, burning through electricity to do what the sun and a light breeze would have handled for free. Walk the full length of that street and you will not see a single clothesline. Not one. And in a lot of these neighborhoods, that is not a coincidence. It is a rule. In some cases, it is enforceable by law. How did a country that built its entire identity around freedom and independence become the one place on earth where drying your clothes outside can get you fined? Before we get to America, there is something most Americans genuinely do not realize. Hanging clothes outside to dry is not a developing world habit. It is not something people do because they cannot afford a machine. It is the default method of drying clothes for most of human civilization, and it still is today. In Japan, one of the most technologically advanced countries on the planet, nearly every apartment building is designed with balconies specifically built for hanging laundry. The railings are spaced to hold drying poles. Building codes account for it. And Japanese weather forecasts include something called a laundry index, a daily rating that tells you how favorable the drying conditions are outside. The weather report plans around it. In Italy, clotheslines strung between apartment windows have become part of the country's visual identity. You see laundry drying above the streets of Naples the same way you see yellow taxis in Manhattan. It is woven into how those places look and feel and function. In Brazil, India, South Africa, Mexico, across Southeast Asia, the pattern holds. Clothes go outside because the sun costs nothing, the wind costs nothing, and the results are often better than what a machine produces. Fabrics last longer when they air dry. Colors hold. Elastic keeps its shape. There is no mechanical stress pulling fibers apart. Roughly 3 out of 4 people on Earth dry their laundry this way. Not because they lack the alternative, but because the alternative does not improve much on what nature already provides. Sunlight even acts as a mild disinfectant, which is something a heated drum cannot replicate. The United States stands almost entirely alone in treating the electric dryer as the default. Most Americans do not just prefer the dryer, they have never seriously considered another option. And the reason for that has almost nothing to do with the technology itself. To understand how America got here, you have to go back to 1945. The Second World War had just ended. 14 million soldiers were returning home, and they all needed somewhere to live. What followed was the most explosive residential construction boom in American history. Developers like William Levitt began building entire towns from empty farmland. Thousands of nearly identical houses were assembled on an industrial scale. Each one came with a specific package: a car in the driveway, a television in the living room, and increasingly, an electric appliance for every domestic task that used to be done by hand. The automatic clothes dryer had existed in some form since the 1930s, but early models were bulky, unreliable, and expensive. The post-war manufacturing surge changed that almost overnight. Companies like General Electric and Whirlpool began producing compact, affordable units and then spent enormous budgets marketing them as the future of American life. Magazine advertisements from the 1950s told the whole story. A woman in a spotless kitchen, smiling. No clothesline, no weather worries, no lugging wet sheets into the backyard. Just press a button and let modernity handle the rest. The message was not subtle. Clotheslines were the past. Dryers were the future. If you were still hanging laundry outside, you had not caught up yet. But the appliance industry only created the product. What locked the behavioral change in place was something entirely different. The Homeowners Association. Homeowners associations emerged alongside the suburban boom as a mechanism for protecting property values. The idea was straightforward. If everyone in a neighborhood maintains their home to a shared standard, the area stays attractive and prices remain stable. Paint your house, mow your lawn, keep things tidy. But over the following decades, homeowners association rulebooks expanded far beyond basic maintenance, and clotheslines became a specific target. The reasoning was almost entirely about image. Lines of hanging laundry looked cluttered. They broke the clean, uniform aesthetic that post-war suburbs were projecting. Some homeowners association boards went further, arguing openly that visible clotheslines signaled lower income, that they implied a household that could not afford modern conveniences. By the 1970s and 1980s, clothesline bans had become standard covenant language in homeowners association agreements across the country. These were not suggestions. They carried legal weight. Hang a sheet in your own backyard and you could face fines of hundreds of dollars. Today, somewhere between 60 and 80 million Americans live in communities governed by homeowners associations. A significant number of those associations still maintain written bans on outdoor clothes drying. Tens of millions of people could not legally hang a towel in their own backyard even if they decided to try. The dryer did not win because it was dramatically better at drying clothes. It won because the alternative was quietly made either unfashionable or illegal. Now here is where the scale of this gets uncomfortable. The average American household runs somewhere between 300 and 400 dryer loads per year. A standard residential dryer pulls roughly 2,000 to 5,000 watts per cycle, depending on the model and the load. Across a full year, that adds up to somewhere around 1,800 to 5,000 kilowatt hours just to remove water from fabric. Multiply that across roughly 80 million dryer-owning households, and the total is enormous. Residential clothes dryers account for approximately 6% of all household electricity consumption in the United States. To put that number in perspective, your dryer almost certainly uses more energy per year than your refrigerator, and your refrigerator runs every hour of every day. The cost per household lands around $100 to $200 annually, depending on local rates and machine efficiency. On its own, that is not catastrophic, but multiply it across the entire country and it amounts to billions of dollars spent each year doing something the atmosphere handles at no charge. There is also a safety dimension that rarely comes up in conversation. Clothes dryers are responsible for an estimated 15,000 house fires per year in the United States, most of them caused by lint buildup in vents and exhaust ducts. It is one of the leading causes of residential fires, and it is entirely a byproduct of the machine itself. A clothesline has never started a fire. Then there is the fabric question. That lint you pull from the trap after every cycle is not dust. It is not loose debris. It is tiny fibers ripped from your clothing by heat and mechanical tumbling. Every single load shortens the lifespan of everything inside the drum. Your favorite shirt does not just fade over time. The dryer is actively pulling it apart. Air drying produces almost no lint because there is nothing physically stressing the material. Some states have started pushing back. Florida, Colorado, Hawaii, Vermont, and Maine have all passed right-to-dry laws. Legislation that overrides homeowners association bans and protects a homeowner's ability to use a clothesline on their own property. The specifics vary by state, but the principle is consistent. You own the house. You should be able to dry your socks however you want. In Europe, rising energy prices have made outdoor drying even more common than it already was. In Australia, the Hills Hoist rotary clothesline is practically a national icon, so deeply embedded in the culture that it has appeared on postage stamps. In these places, the dryer is a convenience for bad weather days. It was never promoted as a replacement for the outdoors, but across most of the United States, these efforts remain the exception. The suburban infrastructure, the cultural habits, and the legal frameworks all continue to point in one direction toward the machine. And this is the part that is worth sitting with, because what happened with the clothesline is not really about laundry, it is a pattern that repeats across American consumer culture. A practical, functional behavior that served people well for centuries gets caught in a specific historical moment. The post-war manufacturing boom, the suburban explosion, the golden age of consumer advertising. At that intersection, the behavior gets quietly reclassified. It goes from normal to outdated, from thrifty to embarrassing, from what everyone does to what people who have not made it yet still do. The clothesline did not vanish because dryers were dramatically superior at the task of drying clothes. It vanished because at one precise moment in history, a machine became easier to sell than a length of rope. And once the association hardened, once hanging laundry outside became linked with lower income or rural life or old world traditions, the infrastructure followed the stigma. Homeowners association covenants formalized it. Builders stopped including outdoor drying areas in new homes. Children grew up without ever seeing a clothesline in use, so the thought of using one simply never occurred to them. What makes this genuinely fascinating is that it happened almost entirely within one country's borders. Japan, Italy, Brazil, India, Australia, they all have access to electric dryers. They manufacture and sell them. Plenty of people own them, but none of those cultures made the dryer into a social signal. None of them decided that how you dry your shirt says something about your economic class or where you stand on the ladder. The appliance stayed an appliance. In America, it quietly became a statement about who you are. There are stories you can find in immigrant communities across the country of families arriving from Latin America or Southern Europe or East Asia and hanging their laundry outside as they always had, only to receive a formal violation letter within the first week. Not from the police, from a neighborhood board. The message was polite, but unmistakable. That is not how things are done here. For many of them, it was one of the first signs that fitting in would mean unlearning habits they had never thought of as habits at all. And none of this makes Americans wrong. A family in Minneapolis running a dryer in January when the wind chill is 20 below zero is making a completely sensible decision. A single parent working 2 jobs who needs dry uniforms in 30 minutes does not need a lecture about the Portuguese countryside. Context always matters. But what is worth noticing is how invisible the whole transformation becomes once it is complete. Most Americans have genuinely never asked themselves why they do not hang clothes outside. The question does not even register. It just feels like the way things are. Like the obvious choice, like there is nothing to explain. And that is the signature of a cultural shift that worked perfectly. The origin story disappears, the marketing dissolves, the homeowners association rules fade into background noise, and all that remains is the behavior, humming quietly in your laundry room. 70 years of accumulated history hiding inside a machine you never thought to question. Next time you pull a warm armful of clothes from the dryer and scrape the lint from the filter, think for a second about where all of that came from. The post-war housing boom, the appliance advertisements, the homeowners association fine print. 70 years of small decisions stacked on top of each other until a clothesline started feeling like something from another century. That is a lot of history sitting in a very small room. I want to hear from you. Do you hang your clothes outside? Has anyone ever told you that you cannot? Or are you watching from somewhere where this entire conversation sounds completely absurd because where you live, everybody just does it? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. If this made you look at something ordinary a little differently, hit subscribe. There is a whole series here pulling apart the hidden logic behind things Americans take for granted and how they look from the outside. See you in the next one.